All right, let's get started with authenticity. Like it's such a buzzword. Everyone's telling you to be yourself, either your parents, friends, people at work, like, but it means different things to different people. So what does it mean to you and what does it look like for you?
I mean, everybody's like, be authentic. And I'm like, do you really want me to be myself? Because I'll show you myself right now. But I think to me mostly is because it means so much to everybody, right? Like it's open to such different interpretation. But I think it's just that general feeling of not having to censor yourself, right? Of not having to like second guess what you're gonna say or what you're gonna do around certain people or in a certain situation, right? So just being able to freely do things without thinking of like, oh shit, there's gonna be some sort of consequence to that.
Right. But when you say censorship, like what do you mean? Because that can mean so many different things. It can mean like what you say, how you look. Like what comes to mind when you think about like censoring yourself?
All of it. um, so one of my biggest problems is not necessarily what I say, it's how I say it. That Bronx, New Yorker comes out and I don't hear it because to me, I'm hearing myself, right? Like to me, it's normal, but somebody hears it and they're like, oh, this girl's abrasive. She's a little much. And I was like, what? I didn't even mean it that way. Like, I'm shocked. What do you mean? So as far as like how I say certain things, even in the way I dress, like we've talked about this before where I'm very curvy. So Planita from sales will be wearing the same exact skirt I'm wearing, but I'm the one that gets called out for it, right? Like I've seen situations like that. So having to think about like, oh, what am I gonna wear? Because are people gonna see it as something sexual or provocative? And in reality, it's not, because it's like a skirt like down to here, but perception, right?
That's crazy. I've heard that so many times. But I mean, we've spoken about this before, right? Like you probably get it from both sides. Women probably look at you like, oh, like what the hell she wearing? That outfit is so tight and blah, blah, blah. But then you get it from the male side as well. You probably get the male gaze and they probably look at you in a sexual way, right?
I went to the beach on Saturday and my baby suit was a little much. But
What's
my friend was like,
much?
a little much, you know. One friend was like, yo, everybody's staring at you. And I was like, oh God. They're probably like, look at this girl. Look at me. He was like, nah, it's probably like the guys staring and the girls probably criticizing like, oh, why is she showing off so much? And the guys are probably like, damn. Oh. I mean, it's what makes you comfortable, right? At this point, I'm not bothered by the stares. I'm not doing it for the stares, don't get me wrong, but comes with the territory, right? Being self-aware in how people see you, whether it is about how you dress or how you express yourself, and just being able to be comfortable with that, right? Because if you're not, then I think that's where some of that censorship comes in, because you're scared of what people are going to say, what people are going to think of you.
Yeah, haters are going to hate. You show it off, girl. That's crazy, because I feel like sometimes, like, hearing the word censorship, like, sometimes we probably do it to ourselves, but then other times we're probably forced to do it because of some policy, right?
Yeah.
Like, what were some times where you felt like you just did it yourself? Like, no one actually said anything, but you maybe just, like, self-consciously are probably thinking, like, oh, they're probably going to say something. Let me just, like, not do this.
Yeah, I mean, even back to, like, the way that I dress, right? Going to the office, and I'm aware of it being a professional setting and all that, but there's times it's like, even if I wear sweatpants, I can't cover up the shape of my body, right? So it's gotten to that point where I'm like, damn, what can I do? What can I wear to kind of play it down? Because I feel sometimes like people may stare at me and think certain things. And so at work is where I try to be more careful with that. And there's been times where I wear a skirt and it's pretty long, but it is tight fitting. And I'm like, oh my God, I need a cardigan. I need something to cover up like how much is showing. Because then, like, even I get to the office and, like, some of my friends at the office will be like, damn, Cam, your ass is out of control today. And I'm like, oh, thank you, but no, don't tell me that, because now I'm going to have to cover up. So.
That's crazy, because, right, your friends are probably saying it in such a positive way, right? They're like, oh, girl, you looking good. And for you, it's like, oh, they noticed.
I'm like, I am, but then HR is going to notice, too.
No, facts. What about HR though, or other people? Like, have they ever, like, obviously you probably get the positive feedback, but have you ever gotten anything negative? Like, oh, maybe you should wear something a little bit more baggy.
So not not specifically from somebody who was like calling me out, like, ooh, that's not appropriate for the office. More so, so I was having a conversation with somebody at the office, kind of like some guidance, right? And it was on a super unrelated topic, but it was mostly about like the way you express yourself and where you're from and where you grew up, right? So like I'm from the Bronx and he came from a similar upbringing. So he's had kind of that similar feedback on how he behaves and how people perceive him. So we're talking about all that, and he was like, yeah, you might also want to be careful with the way you dress and, you know, the tight skirts and this and that. Like, people might look at it a certain way. And I was just like, tough, you know, because even though I just said, like, I have censored myself sometimes because I do feel a little bit self-conscious, it's a battle that I fight because I tell myself, why? It's not my fault that you see me in a sexual way that's on you. Because if you think about it, it's the way that I am. I can't change that. I can't change the shape of my body. Even if I lose 40 pounds, that curve is still gonna be there. So it was just like, you have to learn which battles to fight, right? And that's not a battle I care to fight. That's something that is always gonna be an issue maybe for others, because I feel very blessed. I am happy with all this, but I'm just like, that doesn't detract from my work, you know? So let my work speak for itself. And if you feel a certain way about my outfit, like, that's a personal issue.
I love that. Yeah, like, I'm sure it wasn't always like that though. Like, how did you get to that point where you are so comfortable and just, I don't really care what people say, I don't really care what people think, I'm gonna dress however I want to dress? Like, did you ever get to a point where you just like, maybe I should change the way I shop, or maybe I should like change my outfit, or like, did you have those thoughts?
Not necessarily around the clothes. I think it was a general mindset, right? Because even in my personality and like the way that I express myself, I've had several instances at work where it's like, ooh, Carmery is a little difficult to work with. And so like the way that I perceive it is, it's not that I'm difficult to work with, it's just that I challenge certain things that I don't agree with, and I speak up about that. Whereas other people won't. They'll be like, okay, sure, I'll go ahead and do it. And I'm like, yo no te voy a seguir la corriente. Like, if I find something that needs to be tweaked, or maybe we should do it a little differently, or that I don't agree with how you want to approach it, I'm going to say that, right? But back to the way about how I may say certain things, some people may perceive it as like, oh, she's being difficult. And it's like, maybe I should have said it a little differently, but I still stand by what I said, right? So it just got to a point that I tried to tone it down. I tried to be very self-conscious about the things that I said and how I said it. And I still do, right? Because I'm not saying like, oh, I'm just going to go ahead and like be 100 with them. Like, a time and a place for everything. But I tried it their way, didn't work either. You know, there was an instance at the office with this girl, and she was kind of rubbing me the wrong way. And I was like, you know what, Cam? Don't be that person. If you say something, you're gonna come out your neck, say something stupid, it's gonna be a problem, so don't say anything. Guess who still got in trouble?
You. For what though? Like, what happened?
So-and-so came to me and told me that you made her feel unwelcome. So I'm damn if I do, damn if I don't. And that's when it got to the point that I was like, yo, I can't win no matter what I do. So I'm going to just stop trying to win there. Like, I'm here to work. I'm not. And listen, I've been at my company for 4 years now. I'm in my third position, promotion after promotion. Like, say what you want about maybe how I may express myself, but I'm doing something right. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it just got to the point that I was like, I cannot please everybody. And it's causing me more of a headache to have to be so self-conscious to please people. I'm gonna just be me.
Yo, that resonates with me. That resonates with me.
Life.
That resonates with me so much. I had this incident too where, like, very rarely would I get someone that says anything about how I dress, but there was one incident where, like, someone on my team was saying something, and legit, all I said was, I disagree. Just like that. I was like, I disagree. And they were like, oh, why do you disagree? And I was like, X, Y reason. And they were like, all right. And it got into this whole argument. And I just kept saying, like, I disagree because of like X, Y, and Z. Like, it's okay if we don't agree. Like, it's okay. But it was so shocking to them that like someone disagreed with them that it got into this like big fuss. And apparently, like, after that incident, I was labeled as aggressive because I was being loud. And it's funny because at the time I was like, yo, why would they call me aggressive? I wasn't being
loud.
aggressive.
This is my normal volume.
Yo, that too. But it's funny, I actually I go to therapy every week, but in one of my therapy sessions, I was telling my therapist about that incident. And she was like, Pabel, like, were you actually being loud as far as your tone? And I was like, you know what? I probably was being loud. And she broke it down to me. She was like, well, have you ever felt unheard by your teammates? And I was like, yo, all the time. I be saying shit. They don't listen. 5 minutes later, someone else says something, and then they listen to them. And I'm just like,
oh my God.
I just.
Are we the same person? Every time. It makes me want to just like, I'm going to just stay quiet because I speak up and y'all not listening. So, pa que hablo?
Exactly. But what she told me always stuck with me. She was like, people that yell are trying to use, like, that's the voice of the unheard. Like, the reason why we're being loud potentially is because we've gone unheard so often where we feel like we have to yell for someone to listen.
Well, Dominicans haven't been heard their whole lives.
That's happened to you too, though?
All the time. All the time. Somebody will say something and I'm like, yo, did I not just say that? Like, hello.
Do you think it has to do anything with you being like a woman, a Latina, or do you think it's just like team dynamics? Like, what do you think like carries into that?
I don't even know, to be honest, because I think for me, so my entire career so far has been in the Hispanic space, right? Mm-hmm. So I know and I've heard of all these challenges people face feeling like they're the minority in their company. And I don't feel that way because my entire career I've been surrounded by people just like me, right? And more so in New York, like everybody in the New York office is like Dominican or Puerto Rican or whatever. And then you got the Miami office that's like Cuban, right? So I'm not like the outsider. As far as women, there's nothing but women on my team. So like, I couldn't even explain where it comes from.
That's so interesting.
I wish I knew, because I'm like, I would like to be heard.
Yo, that's so fascinating, because your situation for me, like, I've always been the minority in the office, and I've always been like, yo, what if the whole office was Latinos and Latinas? Like, none of this shit would happen. But from your point of view, like, some of these things still happen though.
Things still happen. My biggest, what I've picked up on at work is not so much cultural upbringing, right? Because we all share that similarity. I think it's more so like geographical location.
Okay.
So you've got people that grew up in Long Island. You've got people that grew up in Miami. So like your surrounding, I feel like brings out something different in you. And I feel like my issue has been, oh, that girl from the Bronx. And nobody has said it directly to my face, but I always like in little nuances and things that people say, and like, they don't want to say it out loud, but I pick up on it and it's like, oh, so you're telling me to dial down the ghetto-ness. And even my friends playing around, like they'll say it as a joke and I'm not necessarily offended by it, but it just brings to light that truth. It's like, Cam, leave the Bronx in the Bronx. And I'm like, oh, okay. And again, it's coming from my friends, and it's in that way that I'm not offended by it. But I'm like, if you're thinking it and you're my friend, somebody else is thinking it and they're just not saying it to me. So I think that's been my biggest like issue in the workplace. I don't want to be labeled as that ghetto girl.
I was working on a PowerPoint presentation one day, and somebody told me like, those slides look ghetto. Can you fix them? And I was like, that's
what is ghetto? Please describe this to me.
Yeah. And I was like, was that just a bad choice of words, or like, did she really say that to me? But like, it's interesting. Like, you mentioned the word ghetto, and in correlation to probably like how many times like people mention the Bronx. Like, what does the Bronx mean to you? Like, how do you see the Bronx versus like, how do you think people see the Bronx in you. Yeah.
Yo, I can't tell you the number of memes people send to me like, oh, the Bronx is, women for the Bronx are the toughest men I know. And I'm like, damn, why you gotta do the Bronx? Like, what did the Bronx ever do to you? I get all the Bronx memes. I'm like, damn, do you not know anybody else that lives in the Bronx? Shit. I mean, I feel like in New York, the Bronx is considered like the worst borough, like the forgotten borough, the dirty borough, right? And I hate that perception. I'm just like, okay, we haven't been gentrified just yet because we're further away from Manhattan, but I don't consider us to be the worst. Like, to me, I'm very proud of the fact that I grew up in the Bronx. And I like that I can exist in different worlds, right? So we've talked about this one. There's Latin Grammy Cam, you know where I'm going. There's Latin Grammy Cam, and there's like La Marina Cam.
Or Cafe Nunez Cam.
Cafe Nunez. There's Ankles Cam, and there's Red Carpet Cam. We're not gonna talk about that. We're gonna leave it right there. But I can exist in those different worlds, and I know how to act in those worlds, right? People come into the Bronx. I've had friends of mine who aren't from here come around, and I remember one time, like, we went to a game at Yankee Stadium, and we were coming back to my house because homegirl lived in Long Island. She's like, I might as well just stay over at your house. We're in the Bronx, and we'll just go to work the next morning. We're going down to the subway, and rats just run across. And she said, this is why I don't come to the Bronx.
Come on, that's everywhere in New York.
But people see it as gross and dirty. And I think one of my worst experiences with how people see the Bronx was a roommate of mine in college. She was color deficient. From like
mixing some melanin?
Just a tad. From like South Jersey. And I went to Rutgers. So Rutgers had a football game versus like the Army team, I think it was. And they did it at Yankee Stadium. So her friend had a car, and we all drove down. And I didn't really have a ton of friends back then. This was the beginning of like my first year at Rutgers. So I was like, why not? Let me hang out with my roommate, sure. And we drove down to the Bronx. As we're driving through like Northern Jersey, they had stopped by like a gas station. And she was like, oh my God, this is so sketchy. I hate driving through here. Like, I always feel like I'm gonna get shot driving through here. And like, I also lived in North Jersey for a bit. Like, I lived in Union City for a while. So I was like, I just didn't say anything because we're in the car, I'm with her people. I'm like, not the time and the place for an argument, but I was offended by that. Then we get to the Bronx. That is home to me. And they paid God knows how much for parking because they wouldn't trust parking their car anywhere else. Because you think automatically because you're coming to the Bronx, somebody's gonna break into your car. And so I was like, bet. You, in the matter of like an hour, you just offended every single place that I identify as home. Like, is that how you view me, right? And so like, I didn't say much to her in the moment, but after that, it was an argument. And like, we never spoke after that. Yeah. Because I was genuinely offended. Like, I don't feel that way about where I'm from. I completely understand that there's certain neighborhoods here that are not the best. But like, no pa tanto. You know, so I do take offense sometimes to like how people view the Bronx. I'm just like, y'all make it seem like nothing good can come from here. And I think that's because of that perception of the Bronx, is that perception that carries on into anybody that's from here.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. A lot of people have that negative perception of it. And there's a lot of brands nowadays that are like trying to reshape that. Like Bronx Native, there's the Bronx brand. There's a couple like different brands that are trying to do some dope shit.
I got my little like Bronx Metro card pin from them.
Oh yeah? From which one?
I think it's from Bronx Native. I bought it at like some fashion show event thing, but it was like all about the Bronx and stuff. I was like, yes, my people coming up.
He went to the same high school as me. Not the same year. We went different years, but Cardinal Hayes in the Bronx.
I know. My brother was gonna go to that one. I think he ended up going to St. Raymond's.
Boo.
Like the rivals, my bad.
Nah. It's funny too, because sometimes like I forget when, but I was talking like one of my coworkers, she went to Fordham, and we were talking about the Bronx, and I was like, oh, I went to high school in the Bronx. But it's funny, like I feel like she was about to tell a story about the Bronx, like in a bad way about Fordham. And when I said I went to high school in the Bronx, like the whole story just kind of changed.
She was like, wait, let me not say that story.
Yeah. Nah, but I get that though. I mean, and it's interesting too, because you're in a position at work, or you've been in positions at work where you're not just like behind the desk, right? Like you said, you'd be going to Latin Grammys, and you'd be like meeting and greeting people. I'm sure people ask you where you're from, right? Like I've had someone else on the podcast, and for a minute, like not that she was ashamed of being from the Bronx, but she didn't want to say outright that she was from the Bronx, because she didn't want them to like devalue like everything else that she brought to the table. Yeah. Like she thought that they would put that perception over like all these other things in her life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, do you find yourself sometimes not necessarily like not being proud, but just like putting it all out there, like, hey, this is where I'm from, blah, blah, blah?
I don't necessarily put it out there like that, but I also think it's kind of like reading the room. So one of my clients, Dominican, she was from the Heights, and like, I don't think I knew that she was from the Heights immediately, but I knew that she was from New York. Mm-hmm. And we clicked instantly. And I was, when I first met her, I was an associate manager, right? So I wasn't even at like the front of that campaign. I was just like support. But we hit it off. There was some issue with the product that wasn't delivered on time, and I was just on it like that. Not that Natasha was on set, so then like the whole Dominican vibe just came out. And then like the next year, I was officially like starting to manage and lead on that account. And she happened to go into the office for a bigger like brands meeting, and I wasn't there. So the following meeting, she was like, Niña, ¿dónde tú estabas? If I would have known that you weren't there, like, ¿pa qué? Like we're homies. And after that, when I was like in front of the whole campaign for like Premio Juventud, her and I were like this, like she respected me, right? So I think it just kind of goes to show, like, don't be ashamed of where you're from, because sometimes that might be a connection with somebody. You know, it's not, you might be that person that like, you may not see a lot of representation of yourself around you. Be that representation, because somebody else might pick up on it and be like, oh, that's dope, right? And so even like kids and whatnot, they'll look up to you.
Yeah.
I had an instance where we have this program, there's this program, Junior Achievement, I don't know if you've heard of it, but Univision works with them. And it's kind of like, they're taught like these life lessons, right? These lessons around like real life values and skills. So in school, you learn math and English and science, but like this was like real world, like resume stuff and careers, esa cosa. It was like a class of like 5th graders, I think it was, and I was teaching them this whole lesson for the day, and the school just so happened to be in the Bronx. And I can't tell you the number of kids that I felt like they didn't have this positive force in their life, right? We had certain questions, like this workbook that they had to go through, and they were like, name 3 positive things that a parent would say about you. And some of these kids couldn't even say that.
Wow.
And I was like, yo, these kids don't have that influence in their life. Like a lot of these kids probably don't even know the opportunities that would be available to them. And honestly, like I spent that whole day just like trying my hardest to relate to them. I was like, yo, I walked here today. I live around here, and look at me where I am now. Like I do this for work, XYZ, like I went to college, just did whatever. Like just trying to share my story in an enthusiastic way for them to be like, oh my God, like there is more than what I'm seeing around me, right? Because people, what is the saying? If you knew better, you'd do better. Like some of these kids just don't know better. So I think that's important also to share your story, because if you're being yourself, you might inspire somebody else to be themselves also.
Yeah, I love doing those events. I think another saying too that's close to that is like you can only be what you can see. So like these kids, if they never saw someone that looked like you walk in, they probably never knew that they could work at a company where you work at or do like the type of work that you can do. Yo, honestly, those events are my favorite. It's so funny doing.
We even brought them to the office, and they're like,
yeah.
And when I was there, I never saw things like that, you know. But I mean, here I am. It wasn't like I had parents who like pushed me to do good in school and to find opportunities and things like that. And even though they probably couldn't help me as much because they didn't understand it, because they didn't have those opportunities out here, like at least I had that influence. I think it's so dope to like pass on what you have in your life.
I love it. It's that representation is so important too. And going back to like all these experiences where you've worked, yo, can you give me like a sneak peek of like what it's like to work with so many people that probably look like you? Like there's the bad things, right? Potentially that are in every company, right? But I'm sure there are some dope stuff. Like you walk in and like, yo, what you do this weekend? Yo, word?
Right. It's what scares me about ever working for a company that's not Hispanic based, right? Because I find such a sense of culture and like family where I work because we understand each other. And people who have left the company have come back. I had my boss now, she used to work at BuzzFeed. My boss before that, she was working at Snapchat. All came back. All those free snacks didn't add up to this culture and this feeling that you have. Like we treat each other like family. Even through the whole pandemic, we've been keeping in touch and like sending each other jokes and whatnot. But as far as the culture itself, like we relate, and that's the most important part. Because it does make you feel like you don't have to hide any part of yourself, right? And we do café. I do café too. I used to. God, back before March, we do like cafecito, things like that. If anybody ever went to like their home country, always bringing back the treats and whatnot. And like we all know what they are. It's not like, oh, what is this random little snack? Everybody just knows. And then we have like little random like family type get-togethers. Like, oh, let's have an ending of summer celebration. Y todo mundo trae comida, and it was. I didn't, so in my last company, my department was Hispanic, but the entire company wasn't. And the feeling was just not the same.
What was it like? Like, what was different about it?
It was just very dry. Everything was no flavor. Everything was just straight up about work. And gatherings were like wine and cheese. No, give me a pequeño, give me pastelito.
Wait, so I'm assuming because it's like this for me, right? Like in my job, most of the people there are not Hispanic. Like maybe 5% of the population is Latino or Latina. Then there's like another 5% that's Black. So we have employee resource groups within the company that it's like the Latin Act group, the Black Act group, the Pride Act group, and those get-togethers lit, all of them lit. But you have like the bigger company get-togethers, and they're okay, but it's not the same like when you around your own people, right? So was it more like that? Like the little smaller groups were lit, but at your company now,
in that company we didn't even have that. And it's part of the reasons why I left. Like I just didn't feel content with the culture there. And so it's funny, like at Univision now, because we are all Hispanic, with the ERGs that we have are not related to that, right? Like we have like the women's one, we have the LGBTQ one, we have like the young professionals one. So like that's what we call Emerge, and Emerge is lit. We're always throwing some sort of party at the office. But even like the company-wide celebrations, like the past 2 years that we had Christmas parties, lit.
I can't even imagine what that's like. Is
Come through, we'll accept you.
Is it just like Spanish music the whole time? Like I can't even imagine.
Yeah. Before, oh my God, I remember one year, I guess we didn't have the company wasn't there. We didn't have the budget for like an out-of-office holiday party. Whatever the reason was, but the party was at the office itself. Let me tell you how I was at the office until like 9 p.m. Because we just kept partying.
That's so dope.
Work was done, and we're still upstairs drinking, dancing.
That's so dope.
I'm very blessed in that sense. It's
That's
so
so
important
dope.
to me.
I've always
I'm
wanted to.
terrified of like going anywhere where that type of culture does not exist.
Yo, I don't even know what that would be like. I've always wanted to do it. Maybe one day I'll pull the plug for like a few years.
You got the snacks
I got this.
and the milk.
It's crazy though when we were talking about just like company culture. I mean, obviously, like there's all these amazing things of like, not having to feel like you aren't going to be accepted. Like people already know what the deal is, right? But it's interesting, like within like a sort of company like that, there's still the ageism, there's still potentially the sexism, there's still like colorism. And what's fascinating to me is that at the company, all the, let's call them individual contributors, aren't white, right? Like you said, right? They're all Hispanic, they're all Latino, Latina. But at the top, it's a bunch of white people. Like, is that weird?
So I feel like I see what you mean. And it is true in some sense. I feel like we have a nice balance at Univision. Like I've seen some of the higher ups, but like the C-suite be very color deficient. But like so many of like the SVPs and people up there like are people that just like you and me. So I don't feel like it's like all these other companies where it's like the higher ups are super blanquitos. But I know what you mean, right? Like our president of sales, our CEO, all those people up there, like you would think that the company was owned by somebody. Our new CEO coming in también, like he's not even Hispanic. So like that to me, when I first saw those things, I was like, this is Univision though. Like why is somebody Hispanic not up there? But honestly, like I can also say that about the company. I do feel like we have a good mix of representation. And honestly, like with all this talk about diversity, to me at Univision, I'm like, what does diversity look like to us? Because if you think about it, we're what everybody else considers to be diverse. So in our case, isn't a blanquito diverse here?
That's interesting. That's really interesting. Yeah. Because if you really think about it, like Univision wouldn't be diverse, right? Because it's all one culture or like
right.
One subgroup. That's interesting. I didn't think about that.
So now there's been a lot of like
hire more white people. Where the white people at?
It's not even that. So there's been conversation around diversity in the workplace, right? And this is like industry wide, right? This is like worldwide, not even just in this industry. Because of everything that's happening, everybody's talking about diversity and culture and all that stuff. And we've even had that conversation. But nobody wants to say what diversity is.
What do you think it is?
I mean, when all these conversations came about, it's because of Black Lives Matter. So I think also a lot of our audience complains about our on-air talent. We don't have a lot of morenitos. We don't. We have a relationship with Televisa, so it kind of trickles down that way that a lot of our talent is Mexican, right? So to me, I was like, when we were having all these diversity conversations, I was like, if you mean Black, just say that. But they also don't want to be the ones to say that out loud. It's kind of like, come on, guys, you all know what diversity means. But I was like, do we? Because if you ask me, I'm diverse. If you ask anybody else outside of Univision, I'm diverse.
Yeah.
I'm like, I was very curious, and I still kind of think about it, like, when push comes to shove and these policies are put into place around workplace diversity and all that, like, what does that really look like in a company that's already diverse?
Right.
That's so open to conversation.
No, but to your point, I mean, I think it's around like diversity of thought, right? And even within like Latin America or like the Caribbean, there are people with different hair textures. There are people with different skin complexions. Even like Latin American in the Caribbean, there's people from like all these different countries, right? So if everyone is just Mexican, for example, like that's not good. If everyone is Dominican, that's not good. If everyone is just like Dominican, Puerto Rican, and Mexican, like even that's not good, right? Like, so getting people from different countries, getting people from different experiences, maybe like maybe there's not enough people from, let's just say, the Bronx. Like, what if everyone in the New York office
You know
is
what?
from what if everyone in the New York office is from Long Island? Like, they're gonna have a certain type of experience that's gonna be very different from your experience,
So I
right?
was just talking to somebody about this, right? And I think that just helps me feel more valid in what I feel like being my authentic self means to me and all that.
Yeah.
So one of my coworkers, we're not in the same department, but we've worked together on certain things. She's also from the Bronx, and she posted something the other day about like she got a little bit too comfortable at work. These were her words. That she got too comfortable. She kind of like let her guard down, and somebody called her ghetto.
Whoa.
And I was like, yo, I've never had it said to me to my face, but I have that feeling too that people look at me that way. And she was like, what? She was like, honestly, she's like, you light up every room you walk into. You just have this personality that's so necessary, especially in marketing and in the creative space. And that at first I was like, oh, thank you, that's so sweet. But that last bit of it, it's like, especially in marketing and in a creative space, because to your point, it's a diversity of thought. If everybody comes from the same exact place and experience, your mindset is most likely gonna work exactly the same. But coming from different places, right? Coming from different cultures, you bring all that together and everybody's able to bring a little bit of something in. And so I'm gonna bring the Bronx.
As you should, girl. Yes.
Of course.
No, but it's so true. I mean, you look at a company, I'm just randomly naming a company, but T-Mobile, for example, right? A new iPhone comes out. They're not just selling to people from Long Island, right? They're trying to sell phones to everybody. So creating a campaign to only a specific group, right? Or only having that perception around like how this group buys, like it's not really going to benefit.
You don't want to limit your market.
Exactly. So yeah, it's so important. But I think that's how people should think about it too. Yeah. I mean, even Latinos too. Like there's this, there's like the white passing Latinos or Latinas, let's call them as well, right?
I don't like that word.
I don't know what to call them.
I know it's become a term, white passing Latino. And I'm like, white passing where? I pass by any blanquito in one of those ignorant states and they're gonna send me right back to Mexico. So I'm like, just that term itself.
You said that they'll try to send you back? Yeah. Oh, okay. Because
they think we're all Mexican. Right? But I mean, like the term white passing in itself, I understand what it means. It means that I have lighter skin. Cool. But I don't pass as white. So like, I don't like that term. I feel like it doesn't make sense. Anybody who looks at me is never going to think I'm white. I have gotten people that think that I'm mixed. And that's probably because I have freckles and curly hair. And it's kind of like a typical like mixed look. But I was like, I would never pass as white anywhere.
See, I don't think you would. But there are people that would, though. Like Cristina. You don't think she looks white?
Cristina, like the Saralegui? Is that what you're talking
about? The talk show host back in the day?
Yeah.
Don't tell me she don't.
Back for that one. I mean, yes, I hear you, but I'm saying the way that term is used so broadly, it's really used to identify anybody who is of lighter skin tones, right?
Yeah, like very like lighter than you and I.
Maybe. Well, I'm like hella tan right now, but
show off. Like there was this.
On it this weekend.
There was this. Do you know who Mark Pritchard is?
Yes. So I was actually on the P&G. Like P&G was my client for a bit at Univision. And we had a lot of conversation around his initiatives around being more vocal because he used to hide the fact that he was part Mexican.
Yeah, but that's one of those situations where, like to our earlier point around like the skin complexion, like he can get away with passing quote unquote as a white male and like no one would question him because he, as society wants to call it, he just didn't quote unquote look Mexican. Yeah. Right. That's more of those situations. I mean, there are other examples of people that like quote unquote pass as white, but they're Latino or Latina. And that's a privilege to some people, right? Because to your point, like if someone looks at you, like they're automatically assume that you're mixed or you're Latina. But if they look at him, they won't necessarily assume unless he actually mentions it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I saw his picture and I was like, if you say so.
There's this
but
other
in
one.
Looking at him, I wouldn't have thought that.
Exactly. Do you know Tony Romo as well?
You did post about that a while back, but I forgot what he was.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another example. I can send you the picture after, but yeah. I think that Tony Romo actually we can talk about that as well, because Tony Romo, he just goes as Tony Romo. He's a former quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. His real name, though,
in my head I was like, Cowboys.
Yeah, but if you heard Tony Romo, like at first I really thought he was Italian. I had no idea. His real name is Antonio Ramiro Romo. When you hear that, though, it's like, all right, I could tell. Like Ramiro.
You know what? That reminds me. So I had an ex of mine who, God, no. I was like, I don't want to name him, but the purpose of this anecdote is the names, right? So his name was Bradley. His sister's name was Ashley. His other sister's name was Hillary. And he told me that his father said that they specifically were given those names because they were white passing names. And he's like part Haitian, so his last name sounded type French. And it's like, if you see his name on a resume, you might have better chances of, because we've all seen the stats, right? Mm-hmm. I'm like, bueno, con un nombre como Carmery Trinidad. Like, now that everybody took it for diversity, I might just have to throw that resume out there and be like, what's up? Does that sound diverse to you?
Oh, I feel you. Yo, I used to hate my name. I like it now just because I embraced it, but it took me a while. Pavel, yeah. What about you though? Have you always just loved your name? Because I know you go by Cam, right? Like, why do you go by Cam?
Yeah. I've never had an issue with like not liking my name. I think it was just that frustration that people couldn't pronounce it. Mm-hmm. So this day,
what do you get?
Camry. I'm like, I'm not a Toyota. When my brother wanted to be an ass, so he would call me Camera. Like, I've heard a lot. And I'm just like, are you illiterate? Like, do you not see the R before the M? Like, where did Camry come from? Like, Carmery in English, right? Carmery in Español.
Ooh, I like that.
Ooh, how that rolls off the tongue. Carmery.
Everything like, sounds better in Spanish.
Mommy, I got me a really exotic girl. Her name is Carmery.
Carmery and Yo, Dominicans though, Carmery and Pavel, that would be Parmery.
Oh, if you and I ever had kids or something like that. Pavel.
Look out.
Okay, it's called Cable. Nah, so it's not. I've never like loved my name. I'm like, okay, it is what it is. Like, I'm like, Mommy, why did you let Papi name me? You know. But no, the nickname was just more so something that kind of came about and it stuck. And so now I just go by that, because if I go to Starbucks and mess up my name one more time,
it's gonna be a scene.
Some novela scene, throwing coffee in their face.
It's funny. I told someone that story. One of my friends, her name is Arlene. I told her, yo, every time I go to Starbucks, I lie to them. I just say my name is Pablo because I'm tired of them messing it up. And she was like, she said something that always stuck with me. It was she was like, Pavel, if we don't train them to say our names, who will? And she said, and someone else told me, like, if someone can say Schwarzenegger, someone can say Pavel.
Sure. That's true.
Yeah.
Don't you feel awkward correcting people sometimes?
I used to. Now I feel like I'm training them.
There's this lady at the office, bro. She's not new. I'm not new. I've been working with her for years now. And there's times when she still gets my name wrong. And I'm like, ¿qué lo que con esta? Carmery. I'm like, bro, you've said my name right in the past. Like, why are you switching it up all of a sudden?
Yo, did you go through this too? Like your name in Spanish, well, your name was meant to be said in Spanish, right? But did you feel, because like my name is Pavel, right? But no one told me how to say Pavel in English. One day I just said my name is Pavel, but like no one told me how to phonetically say it in English.
Yeah.
Did you have to figure that out too? I've
You
always
know
found that
what?
so weird.
I never consciously thought about it, but my little sister calls me Carmery. Like she just
Mm-hmm.
says it. I say Carmery. She calls me Carmery, and I'm like, is it wrong? It's not how I pronounce it, but I was like, that might be right. I don't know. And so I've always thought about it that I was like, the way that I say my name in English is how I've chosen to say it. You know, it's not the correct or incorrect way. Like it was never meant to be said in English. I think about
Exactly.
that a lot with people who have different names. Cause I'm like, oh no. So people who have very like American names, but you know they're Hispanic
Like what?
and you know their parents don't speak English. And I'm like, how does your mom say your name?
like your ex's name? What's his name?
Yes. Oh my God. So my mom could like never say his name. His name is Bradley. How do you say Bradley in Spanish?
Bradley.
Bradley.
I sound Italian.
It's me. Oh
Think
God,
about that.
homie's gonna hear this podcast and be like, "Ooh, she's still talking about me."
Oh, you got high hopes for who's listening to this.
Nah, not at all.
That's so funny. I've always thought about
I'm
that.
gonna post this out there thinking that my coworkers are gonna be listening to what I'm saying, trying to be like, "Ooh, I know she didn't like me."
Yo, yeah, I've always thought about that. Anyway, we don't have that much time, so I want to ask you this last question, and I think you kind of answered it already, but maybe something else will come up.
Mm-hmm.
Like, obviously, now you're at the point where, first of all, like I love it, the fact that you just like this is me. You're embracing all of it. Obviously, like the Bronx jokes will probably never stop, but they're coming from friends most of the time. I hope, and that's way different than
At
like
least in
someone
my
that.
face.
That's true. At least your face. So that's way different than like someone that doesn't know you. But as far as like continuing though, moving forward, like what continues to empower and inspire you to keep being your authentic self?
You're right. I did touch on it earlier based on the fact that I'm like, everybody talks about how much representation matters. So I think that if somebody who may not be so sure of themselves, and not even kids, right? Somebody who maybe is starting off at the company might look at me and be like, oh my God, she's somebody who I aspire to be like, right? Like I had a VP who I felt like was that perfect balance of being from the heights, but working in this corporate world, right? And it's like, people always knew that about her. She was the one who would just say things and like whatever came out of her mouth, they're like, yeah, I believe everything you're saying, right? Like she just commanded that respect, but it wasn't a matter, like you can tell she had that different vibe to her, right? But I would look up to her in that sense that I'm like, that's a boss bitch. You know, she's not code switching it, right? There's still, obviously, there's a time and a place for everything. So she was still somebody else outside of work because I would hang out with her outside of work from time to time. And in the office, she would carry herself a little bit differently, but there was still that essence of who she was, right? Like she wasn't trying to obliterate that side of her. Like just, it doesn't exist. So I think about that too, about who may be looking at me and maybe getting that strength from me and looking up to that. But also about the fact that like, I feel like I've gotten pretty far where I am. Like I'm currently a manager at work. And honestly, like it's gotten to the point that it's like, say what you want to say, but my work speaks for itself. And so that's part of what drives me too, that I'm like, I get work done, right? And at the end of the day, that's what matters. And at the end of the day, my clients love me. So what Furanita from sales may think about me, me da igual, you know, like you're not who's signing my check. And I know that sounds so like, I guess, Bronx of me, but it is what it is. Like I've made it this far, and obviously there's things I'm being self-aware of, and I want to tweak certain things maybe, or time and a place for everything. But in a general sense, I've made it this far as I am, and it must be for a reason, right?